about you, but there have been times in the pandemic where things are so hard and so depressing that little things all of a sudden feel like a pretty big victory.
Yes.
So I took a shower.
Yeah.
Close. So go me.
Go Carrie. Yes. That is a rather big deal sometimes.
Some days, honestly, it is. There have been some days when I'm like, just get out of bed.
Yes.
Put your feet on the floor. Just try to keep going. And yeah.
Yeah, there's a coffee store near my house, a coffee shop near my house, that has a sort of sandwich board outside that says, "Congratulations, you made it out of bed. Now come in for coffee." So I always think that's kind of cute.
I do too. Sometimes I tend to be very driven, and I'll make a list of like anywhere from 5 to 20 things I plan to do every day. And then for a while, when I wasn't getting much done, I was so frustrated and depressed. And I just thought, okay, if you have 20 things to do today, if 1 to 2 of them gets done, that is huge.
Yes.
And thinking that way has kind of helped me a lot.
Yeah, shoot for the moon.
Shoot for the moon, but if you land among 1 star, that's perfectly okay.
Yeah.
So, kind of all I think reconfigured the way many of us like think anyway.
Yeah.
These days.
Exactly.
So we are back, and we are going to talk about one subject that we love, and Laura has spent the last 8 years of her life dedicated to. 10 years?
Well, 9 now.
9 years.
Yeah.
And that is Marion Davies.
Yay.
Yay. So Laura, tell me, how did you first fall in love with Marion, which by the way is very easy to do?
It is very easy to do, yes. And I had known about Marion for many, many years before I even started thinking about doing anything on her. The first sort of exposure I had to Marion was when I got a copy of what's marketed as her memoir. It's not actually her memoir. We can talk about that, but I'll finish the story first. I was gifted a book, that was marketed as her memoir, The Times We Had, right? When I was about 13, maybe 12 or 13. And I read it. And even like as a 12 or 13 year old, I was impressed with what an amazing life she had. I mean, she just struck me as somebody who was so interesting. And so she had been at the back of my mind for, years, over a decade before I even started thinking about writing something about her. 2011, I started my blog, realized how much I loved the research and the writing, and started thinking about doing something bigger. Very long story short, Marion was the first name that came to mind as somebody very interesting, and she became my subject. And I have been so overjoyed with how she is as a subject. She's interesting, she's complicated, she's everything I touch sort of blossoms in her life. I mean, everything sort of leads to something deeper. Just how she reacted to things and her inner strength. And I mean, she's an amazing woman. And every person that I have talked to who knew her, and I'm lucky that there are a lot of people who are still alive who knew her, has said, what a wonderful woman she was. I kept hearing over and over, Marion was the most wonderful woman I've ever known. So she's just been a joy for the past 9 years. And the book is going to be published by University of California Press in September of 2022. So about 9 months-ish.
And we will be doing a Hollywood Kitchen all about Marion Davies to celebrate.
Great. Yes. Yeah.
One of the reasons I'm so excited about your book is that Marion's on the cemetery tour that I do at Hollywood Forever. And, on a weekly basis, I interact with people who don't understand her. I think she's probably one of the most underrated and misunderstood stars in Hollywood's golden age. They assume, oh, she had no talent. She was just the mistress of Hearst. And there's a laundry list of assumptions that she had an illegitimate child with Hearst. I used to believe that as well. I fell into that trap and I admit it, but you were corrected this. People ask about the Thomas instinct. I feel like you got a laundry list of myth busting here. That's going to happen.
The truth is often a lot less interesting than what people want to believe.
They kind of want to believe that saying the truth, never, don't let the truth interfere with a good story, I think.
Yeah, people like a good story, and that's great. I mean, people have a desire to seek out a good story, and they want to believe a story that's good and great. That's wonderful. But the problem is when you're writing a biography or when you're reading a biography, you can't tell the story that's good. You have to tell the story that's true. And
well, I find the truth to be most interesting, honestly. That's what I want to hear.
Yeah, often it is. I mean, with the ins thing and with the child thing,
there's so much that you have to.
Yes, but a lot of the time, yeah, the truth is more interesting than fiction. I've found that a lot with other parts of Marion's life, like the death of Hearst. I mean, I go into the day of Hearst's death deeply in the book, and it's so literary. If you read this in a novel, you would think that it was made up.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I think this is so long overdue because I read the Frederick Giles book a long time ago and I really wasn't happy with it. And that was all that was out there. So I kept thinking, aside from the autobiography or memoir,
Yeah.
So I just remember thinking, God, she deserves better. And when I was growing up, I'm older than you. And when I was growing up, the internet wasn't a thing. You kind of just had whatever you could find at the used bookstore or the library, which was different. And I had always read that, oh, she's just Hearst's mistress. She has no talent. So I really never paid her much attention at all. But when I moved to Hollywood in the year 2000, I saw Show People starring Marion Davies. And that turned the whole darn thing around for me. When I saw that, I was like, I have been lied to. This woman is fantastic. Who is insane enough to say she isn't? Like, I don't understand. Like, it was like a light coming on. I was like, I got to see more because I am blown away. Then I saw the Patsy, and then I saw Peg of My Heart, and then I was just
gonna say, you see the Patsy, like you see Show People, it's like, oh, this is great. She's a wonderful comedian. And then you see the Patsy, it's like, whoa, whole different ballgame. Like she's just so brilliant and a screwball comedian before the phrase was coined.
Absolutely. And she was so much more complicated as a person. Like I often say to people on the tour, people are very, very complicated. Like, don't just look at what's there on the surface. There is so much more to the real human being behind the headlines, behind the myths, the rumors, and everything. And she was so incredibly philanthropic, so generous. There's just so much more to this story, and I cannot wait for you to tell us that story with your book.
Yeah, there's a lot to her. She was a wonderful and complicated, as I was saying, wonderful, complicated, loving, generous. I mean, the thing that she really wanted to be remembered for was her clinic, her children's clinic, that she founded. I mean, it's all in the book, it's a long story, but she founded in 1926 in Western LA for underprivileged children in West LA who their parents didn't have to pay a penny for their healthcare services. Doctors donated their time, and it was a really wonderful community resource. And that's what she wanted to be remembered for. She said she knew she was probably going to be remembered more for, she said, her parties. She didn't say her films, because she never thought of herself very much as an actress, which is incredible. But she said, I'll probably be remembered more for my parties, but what I really want to be remembered for is the clinic.
I love the story about Marion seeing the little boy on the street corner selling newspapers, and she rolled down her limousine window and said, why aren't you in school? And the little boy said, I have to support my family and sell papers. And that she saw to it that he got a job at MGM for the rest of his life.
Yeah, that's Carl Roop, as a matter of fact. Carl Roop, who later went on to become a cameraman on Trapper John MD and High Duke Show. And he was discovered, I mean, he was selling papers outside of MGM. Everybody kind of knew this kid, and how he was very charming and personable and all that. And they were casting young children for the Red Mill. And Marion went up to him and said, "Hey, you want to be in a movie?" And he was like, "Yeah, sure, great. I want to be in a movie." So she brought him on the lot, put him in the Red Mill. And I've never been able to figure out which one he is, which kid he is in the Red Mill, but he's in that little group that sort of follows her around all the time, in the Red Mill. But they became close, and Marion essentially, was concerned about his schooling, as you said, and he said that his dream was to go to the military institute. And so she paid for all 4 years of his time at the military institute because his parents couldn't do it.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was the kind of person she was.
That's beautiful. I mean, wow, that's such a moving story.
Yeah. I have an interview with Carl Roop, talking about his relationship with Marion, and this interview was done when he was very old and had really bad dementia and could barely get a sentence out. But what he said was Marion was a very good person, a wonderful person, and even in that state he was able to articulate that.
What I've kind of learned from my dealings with certain seniors who struggle with memory care issues, they may not be able to tell you much about like the present day or even today, but they can tell you something very vividly about something that happened 30, 40, 50 something years ago. And
Yeah.
it's the mind and the memory are kind of an amazing thing.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, my grandpa had that. He couldn't tell you, what he had for lunch, but he could tell you the entire backstories of his parents. So, but anyway, Carl Roop, went on to be a pretty important guy in TV, in the TV world. Yeah, all because of Marion, I must say.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
And now let's talk too a little bit about Marion Stutter, because she did make the transition from silence to sound when a lot of people didn't.
She was one of the few. She was one of the handful to successfully make that transition.
And she did make several pre-code films. What can you tell us about her struggle to adapt the sound and why you chose the particular film we're about to watch?
Yeah. So Marion had a pretty bad. I know that people who stutter often don't like the word bad. A very significant, we can say, stutter, very noticeable, very, it affected a lot of parts of her life. And essentially every time she opened her mouth, she had to pay attention to how her, what she was saying and how she was saying it. So that was difficult for her going into sound, because not only did she have to worry about how she was acting, the lines, all of that, but she had to worry about what her mouth was doing all the time, because that's, in order to not stutter, but she, it had been a problem for her since she was a kid. And she had ways of getting around it, but there were ways like, singing her lines, that kind of thing, because when people who stutter sing, they don't stutter. That's part of the condition.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and also whispering is a thing. But anyway, she worked really, really hard to learn her lines so well that there was no chance of her, messing up. And so she had this routine, a very strict routine, of going to work during the day, coming home, eating a quick dinner, and then doing her lines for the rest of the night, like until she went to bed. it worked. And she didn't stutter on screen. You know, people who know her from her sound films have no idea that she had this bad stutter, but she did. I mean, I've heard it, you know, in her autobiographical tapes. It's, you can, you know, you can feel her trying to figure out what words to say so that she doesn't stutter, and then she gives up and then doesn't stutters all, you know, for like several seconds straight. But she it's a testament to how hard she worked, really. I mean, above anything, she was an extraordinarily hard worker. I mean, even from the very beginning, from the silent era, you know, from her very first movie, there are stories about her, you know, diving into the river over and over and over again. You know, so she had a backbone of steel. You know, would do whatever it took to be as good as she could be.
Today, when you programmed the movies, you wanted to show Polly of the Circus. So
Yeah.
tell us about that movie and why you picked that one over some of the other pre-codes that she made.
She made a lot of pretty good pre-codes. I enjoy Polly of the Circus. There's some people who say, oh, the music in the background is distracting. I don't see that. So if you're watching the movie with us, you can tell me if you find it distracting. But I think it's great. Her chemistry with Clark Gable is wonderful. You get to see an early Clark Gable, which is fun. And I think it's got a good story. It's got a good story arc. And Marion is great in it, you know, and beautiful and all that. I mean, I think it's a good movie. And there are a lot of people who haven't seen it. There are a lot of people who haven't seen any of her sound films. You know, a lot of people know her. If people know her at all, they know her from Show People and the Patsy. But this one is just a fun one. It's a fun one to see. Yeah.
Excellent. So you want to take questions? See if anyone's asking us.
Yeah, definitely. Let me see. I know I couldn't figure out where the questions were.
Let me see if I've got any coming out. Catherine Bird is saying, I watched Little Old New York the other day.
Oh yeah, right. That was on TCM the other day. Yeah. Yeah, great. That's a great movie. That's one of my favorites. It's one of my personal favorites.
Stephen Smith is saying, so often the truth is more interesting than the myth, but in a different way.
Who's saying that?
That's Stephen Smith.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, in a different way. Yeah. And sometimes you think, I mean, that's what I was saying about you know, about the day of Hearst's death. If you read that in a book, you would be like, what, really? Like in a novel, it would be considered too novelish, you know, but it really happened. Just exactly as I write it in the book. It's incredible.
I think the truth is always going to be stranger than fiction.
What was that?
I think the truth is always usually going to be stranger than fiction.
Yeah. Leslie Apple says Marion had charm, beauty, and talent. Looking forward to reading Marion bio. Oh, thank you. Top 5 actresses of all time. Oh, that's wonderful. Marion is number 3. That's great. I love that, Krista.
Krista Lawler, again, shout out to Krista Lawler. She compiled a huge ton of pre-code movie star recipes for my Pinterest page, which is available. I posted the link so you can all, if you want to make a recipe inspired by or directly from a pre-code star, those are available online. And Krista made that happen. Thank you so much, Krista, for your help there.
Yeah.
Krista
Go ahead.
Krista also says, love how she stood up for Ingrid Bergman when many wanted nothing to do with her here in the States due to her affair with Roberto Rossellini.
I was just going to address that. Yeah, I saw that comment and I was like, I want to talk about that. Yeah, Marion and Ingrid Bergman never met. Wow. They never met in person. But when Ingrid Bergman was essentially blacklisted from working in the United States because of her affair with Rossellini, Marion went full guns to defend Ingrid Bergman. You know, there's some stuff that I write about in the book. I kind of don't want to go into it here because it's kind of complicated and long. But anyway, suffice to say, she defended her in the papers. And she was one of the very first people to write Ingrid to congratulate her on the birth of Roberto Jr. And Ingrid Bergman and Roberto never forgot that. And after Hearst died, Ingrid Bergman sent Marion. Now, remember, they've never met, right? Ingrid Bergman sent her a condolence card that says, "We think of you so much. My husband and I will never, ever forget what you did for us during our difficult time." And so if Marion could do that for somebody, I mean, granted also that she was, she sympathized a lot with Ingrid Bergman, you know, because she had also been through, to, you know, a different extent, but having to, or feeling like she had to hide her relationship, right, with Hearst. And so she certainly identified with Ingrid Bergman, but to do that to somebody you've never met before, I mean, that's remarkable, I think.
Yeah, it's like a random out of the blue act of kindness.
Yeah, she completely went to the bat for her.
And I think the world is so eager to judge other people, but when you're not in their shoes, you're not in their situation, it's,
yeah,
it's really easy to sit back for people and point a finger when, you know, they really shouldn't be.
Yeah. Yeah, she was a rare person. I mean, somebody said that to me once. I forget exactly who it was, but somebody who had known her said to me she was a rare human being. And you know, knowing Marion the way I know her now, that's really true. She did things that she really didn't have to do, but she did simply because she wanted to, and she wanted to make somebody else feel good.
We have a really good question here from from Melanie San Milan.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen an actress portray Marion who you thought embodied her persona, or are they all too caricature? And do you know any San Simeon stories featuring old Hollywood folks that aren't widely known? So let's get to the first question, though, because the film Mank came out last year. Amanda Seyfried got an Academy Award nomination. So let's talk about portrayals of Marion and what you think about those.
There have been a few people who have, what I can say is a few people who have tried to get her right. And I do think that Amanda Seyfried tried to get her right. And that's to be commended. You know, and a few other people too.
Virginia Madsen played her in a movie.
Virginia Madsen, right? Virginia Madsen actually is. I have an interview with her as well, talking about Marion and how she admired Marion. And at one point during the interview, when Virginia Madsen was talking about something in Marion's life, she started to cry. She really sympathized with Marion, which helps a lot in the portrayal, you know. But of course the actors also have to deal with the material, you know. So if the material doesn't do a great job of trying to get the person right, the actor's limited in what they can do. Yeah, but Virginia Madsen is certainly somebody who has a great deal of sympathy for Marion and a great deal of love for her. Yeah, and I think that Amanda Seyfried did the best she could with the material she was given, you know.
Oh, and then Melanie Griffith and the RKO 280.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, next question. So
I mean, I don't want to talk I don't want to go into stuff that will speak badly of anybody or anything. But what I can say is that there have been movies that are subpar, but the actors try their best to get Marion right, and that I think is very praiseworthy.
Definitely not to knock Melanie Griffith in any way.
No, not at all. She's a fantastic.
The way that was written,
yeah.
What could she do?
Yeah, the material was not great. Yes. Yeah. So yeah.
So also the question also from Melanie is, do you know any Sansimian stories featuring old Hollywood that aren't widely known?
Yes, I do know those stories, and I feel like I can't really tell them. Some of them because they're going to be in the book, and other things I feel like it's too complicated to go into in this format, so yeah, wait for the book. Wait for the book. It's 9 months away.
On Hearst Castle, I've always loved the essay book Lulu at Hollywood, because I think she paints a very vivid portrait of what it was like to be there. Yeah.
She doesn't, I have some bones to pick with Lulu in Hollywood, because
fair enough.
Yes. Yeah. I feel like, yeah. She really, really loved Marion's niece, Peppy.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and she's not terribly, she's not terribly kind with some of the things that she has to say about Peppy's death, which is too bad. And I feel like a lot of her anger is misplaced.
Yeah, I enjoy Lulu in Hollywood, but I always read it knowing this is a very specific agenda here. This is a very specific point of view, and that doesn't mean it's necessarily all correct by any means. So yeah, it's kind of one of those books you take with a grain of salt.
And memoirs always are like that. People are writing from their own point of view and their own, either anger at the situation or happiness at the situation or something, and that colors how they interpret certain things. And so memoirs always have to be taken with a grain of salt. Definitely. And also, sometimes they're remembering events that happened like 50 years before. So yeah.
Definitely.
Oh, Crystal Lawler says that there's she loves the video from Cincinnati with John Gilbert and Irving Thalberg dressed up like a girl, and John is playing the hero figure. Yeah, that's from 1926, January 1926, when they were all up there, and somebody was shooting video and everybody was goofing off, and it was just fun. Yeah.
I have such a vivid imagination, and every time I've gotten to visit, I can just hear the laughter and see the people, and I just have this total vision in my head of what it would have been like to be amongst those crowds and those parties and events.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of people have this idea of San Simeon as like a party house, which it absolutely was not. It was strict, and you came to dinner when you were called. You were expected to be at the events that were put on. It wasn't this free for all. It wasn't
Animal House with John Belushi.
Yeah, no, not at all. I mean, Marion, of course, was very fun loving, and she had her friends that she would kind of like, hey, come on, let's go have some fun, kind of thing. But for the most part, it was very structured life at San Simeon.
Totally.
Yeah, and that was the way WR wanted it.
Okay. That's very interesting to know, though, for sure. And also, do you want to plug the Annenberg Community Beach House? I always talk about that on the cemetery tour, and I tell people this must be one of the best kept secrets in LA, because every time I give a tour, I say, who's been to the Annenberg Community Beach House? And everybody just looks at me like, what are you talking about? And I think it's such a treasure. It's such a terrific place, and I wish more people knew about it. I'm always trying to spread the word. So tell us about that beach house and about the event coming up.
So the Annenberg Community Beach House is what's left of Marion's palatial home on the beach. it was Marion and WR's, as a matter of fact. A lot of people are like, oh, Marion's house was actually both of theirs, but Marion kind of had custody of it because she liked the beach, WR liked San Simeon. But anyway, so this gigantic house, and Marion enjoyed having parties there. So there are all these, there's videos of these parties that she had at the beach house and all that. Very long story short, most of the house is gone now. What is left is a sort of a guest-like house that is on the far end of the.
In my world, that's still a mansion, but.
Oh yes. I mean, it's a yeah, it's a big place. I mean, I would be very happy living in that place for yes. But anyway, so that place is sort of the centerpiece of what's now the Annenberg Community Beach House. Wallace Annenberg saved the property. Again, very long story short, Wallace Annenberg saves the property, and she converts it into a community center, which I think is fabulous. For something of Marion Davies to become a community center is exactly what she would have wanted. And so now, there are like after school events there, and her original pool is still there. And it's just a great place. And there are docent-led tours of the remaining vestige of the house.
And the docents are all wonderful. I've met them all. They're a great team of ladies. And every January, Marion's birthday month, they do a big birthday party. So tell us about the birthday party coming up.
So I speak there every year, although this year, because of COVID concerns, it's all happening outside. So I'm not speaking there this year. There's no place for me to speak where I could be heard. But I'm going to come down anyway because I love them. I live in Oakland, by the way, so it's, I don't live in the LA area, so I would have to actually come down. But yeah, so they throw a party. Marion's birthday is January 3rd, and they throw a party sometime during the month of January to commemorate Marion's birthday and to sort of draw attention to the events at the beach house and all that. And it's all wonderful and a lot of fun, lots of love for Marion. And this year it's happening January 30th. So it's happening toward the end of the month. Yeah, so everybody should come if you're around and interested in, what's going on at the beach house. The docents will tell you everything. They're very great people. They're very passionate and all volunteers. And so they do this for the love of it.
And also, if you ever get the chance, I have gone swimming in that pool, and it's so amazing. There's all these gorgeous 20s tiles in the pool from architect Julia Morgan. It's right on the beach. It's gorgeous. I think it's seasonal, only certain times a year, and it's like $10 with a reservation. But if you ever get the chance to swim in that pool, please do it, because you will be very glad you did.
Yeah, and another thing that I wanted to add is if anybody has been to San Simeon, Hearst Castle now, the indoor pool at San Simeon is inspired by the beach house pool. So
yeah, San Simeon is so much fun. I went up there one year long before the pandemic, right when they were decorating for Christmas. So there were Christmas trees up everywhere, and it was so beautiful to see at that time of year.
Yeah, that would be really beautiful. They used to do night tours. I don't think they do that anymore.
Yeah, I'm friends with a couple here in Los Angeles, and they're in the Art Deco Society, and they would get dressed up in their 30s attire and drive up there, and they were living history docents like several times a month. And I don't know if they're doing that now, but they did that for quite some time.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the comments here. Just Googled Marion / my grandfather's birthday, January 3rd. He worked in production at various studios in the 40s and 50s. Oh, so if in the 40s and 50s, then he wouldn't have known Marion, but I was going to say Marion knew all her cast and crew, So if he had worked, at MGM or Warner Brothers in the in the 30s, then Marion would have absolutely known him.
And I just can't wait for your book to come out. I am just so excited. I am totally been a cheerleader for you, like day one, because I just feel like there's so much misinformation on her. She's so misunderstood. And there's so many times that you can verbally tell people this isn't accurate, this isn't true, and they just believe what they want to believe. And so to finally have a book to say, no, this is the source, read this, you know, it's exhaustively researched, that really kind of shuts down a lot of the rumor mill. And I find it very helpful to have something I can tell people, put this book in your hands, read it, and you know, so I will push the daylights out of this when it comes out.
Yeah, although I've come across people who say, I don't care what you say, I'm going to believe what I want to believe anyway. So, you know, you can't, whoops, sorry. You can't reach everyone, but hopefully,
have a book,
yes, hopefully the people who can be reached, you know, will start to believe.
Well, Virginia Rapace on my cemetery tour, and now that Greg Merritt has written his book, I'll just say, hey, read this, thank you. And people go, okay, I'll give that a read. So I think I've convinced quite a number of people to read that book and at least hear what he has to say. So I don't know, any progress
you can do.
Only so much you can do, but any progress we can make to humanizing these people and honoring them, I think is a big thing.
Yeah, absolutely. The humanizing, I think, is really important.
Yeah, because I mean, I had a story happen to me a few years ago. A lady on my cemetery tour said to me, she said, I met Jane Mansfield. Can I share a story about her? And Jane has a cenotaph at Hollywood Forever. And I said, well, of course, the floor is yours, please. And she said that she used to be a school teacher in Los Angeles a long time ago at a private school, and Jane's kids went to the school. And she said, you know, out of all these celebrities and stuff, Jane was the only celebrity parent who went to the school. And she said she would ask about the kids' homework. Jane was at PTA, open house. And I thought that story was so beautiful because, you know, when you hear stories about Jane, the narrative is she was drunk, she flashed her breasts, she was, you know, all these wild, sexy stories. And I don't doubt that is one part of the equation there, but you don't hear that she's super involved, hands-on mom, that she's very intelligent. And to me, these people might be sex symbols, bombshells, movie stars, icons, but at the end of the day, they are people.
They're people first.
They're people first and foremost. And anytime you can peel back that layer and show there's a real human being in there, I think that's really the right thing to do. So that story to me made Jane so real and so human, and to hear it from someone who saw her do this.
I've heard that about Jane Mansfield. I don't know if you told me that story, but I've heard that before, that she was like a PTA parent and like really super involved. My grandma, I don't know if I've told this story before, but my grandma was a nurse at what's now Cedars-Sinai, then Cedars of Lebanon, you know, where all the movie stars went for their treatment. And she told a story about Betty Grable and how she treated Betty Grable's kids when they were getting their tonsils out. And she said that, you know, a lot of the celebrity parents would, you know, be either there or not there, or the nannies would be there or whatever. She said that Betty Grable stayed by her kids' side, sleeping on the chair next to them all night for a tonsil operation. I mean, you know, like she was devoted to those kids. And she, you know, apparently had some conversations with her and, you know, said that she was just the nicest, most down to earth, like you would never know that she was a celebrity.
Just love hearing stories that are humanizing stories about people.
Yeah, and you know, there are these stories about Marion too, just how human she was. But a lot of people didn't, even her friends, you know, didn't take her humanity into account a lot, because Marion kind of tended to veil her feelings, you know, and didn't make a lot known. She preferred to sort of keep a stiff upper lip and all that. But there were a few friends, like Eileen Percy is one that keeps coming up in this way, who would make it a point to check up on her you know, ask her straight out, how are you feeling? Like, how are you with this news? How are you with, you know, everything that's going on in your life? You know, this is difficult. How are you? You know, but not a lot of people would do that. You know, there were a lot of fair weather friends in her life.
I can imagine if you're that rich and you're that generous, there's probably a lot of people that are just along for the ride and along for the fun. But yeah, when dark times lie ahead, you wonder how many of those people stuck by her side.
Yeah, somebody I know who was an acquaintance of hers said that when he first met her at a party, somebody pulled him aside after Marion had sort of taken a little interest in him, you know, pulled him aside and said, "Kid, if you're Marion Davies' friend, you can get anything you want." So, and you know, it was true. Like she would give her life for her friends. But people took advantage of that. And Marion kind of couldn't understand. She had sort of a blind spot for it, you know. She couldn't understand that somebody would be taking advantage of her. That's not really that fair to Marion's intelligence. I think that she knew when people were taking advantage of her, and she chose not to care. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a sad note to end on, but she was a really amazing person. I mean, just again, rare, you know, that kind of generosity and that kind of spirit.
Absolutely. And I hope that when your book comes out, knock on wood, that the world will be a lot more normal and we can have retrospectives of Marion's films at maybe the UCLA Film Archive or somewhere in San Francisco and around the country, TCM. Like, I really hope that her reputation gets a huge boost from this.
Yeah. She needs it. I mean, she needs to be seen for who she was. Really who she was, you know.
Okay.
So. I think we're on.
So this was really interesting because after watching Polly of the Circus, I didn't realize we inadvertently staged a religious themed pre-code double feature.
Who knew?
Who knew? And it's interesting too that that's yet another aspect that pops up in these films, another topic. And we were just saying that I think Joan Crawford in the film Rain would make a perfect triple feature if we were going to do a triple feature, because that also has very similar kind of threads running through it.
Yeah, it was interesting because I think the first one, Miracle Woman, is more about, it's more critical of religion. Like it's more about sort of the hypocrisy that the filmmakers, storytellers saw in sort of the Amy Semple McPherson type of Christianity. And this one is more sort of normal, you know, the morals of society and how a minister is supposed to abide by those. Yeah.
It's interesting. And I think we were talking in the chat on Zoom how Gable seems a little miscast as a preacher. Doesn't seem like a natural fit for him.
Well, yeah, and I think this was so early Gable, you know, this was so early Gable that he kind of didn't have that, you know, people didn't associate him as what we associate Gable with now, you know, kind of a snarky, charming person, but he had that anyway, you know.
Well, I was just thinking too, so we're talking about the movies today. So in this film, yeah, we were talking about how Barbara Stanwyck arrived so fully formed. I think Gable, it took him quite a few films to become Clark Gable.
Yeah.
Like he's miscast in this. And frankly, he's pretty miscast in Night Nurse, another Barbara Stanwyck pre-code, where he plays a criminal that's trying to murder 2 children. I mean, that is really weird casting for Clark Gable. So, he's kind of doing some stuff that really didn't suit his persona until he hit on what did. Which
I think they were
2 maybe.
Yeah, they were trying to figure him out, but by It Happened One Night, I think. I mean, It Happened One Night is peak Gable, like that is Clark Gable right there.
Yes, and I think
and then he just sort of riffed on that all the way through his career.
I think Red Dust and the films with Harlow, those were definitely really good ones too. And
yeah, oh, definitely. Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I don't know if we can see. Can you see my Red Dust photo back there? I don't know if you can. It might be a little too dark.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, that's Jean Harlow and there it is. It's a little bit clearer back there. Jean Harlow and Mary Astor in Red Dust. And I really, really love that photo. It's because it's like a reversal of roles.
Oh yeah. Another film I was thinking about that really kind of broke Gable out as well as a big star was Help Me Krista, I know you're probably watching this, is A Free Soul with Norma Shearer, where he kind of shoves Norma Shearer around and he's a gangster named Ace Wilfong. And I think that's the funniest thing ever, by the way. Someone should have the handle Ace Wilfong on social media. But I think that really broke Gable out too, because he was that kind of mannish, tough rogue that's going to shove you around and you're going to like it. And, I think that was another kind of a pivotal moment for him.
Yeah. It's interesting how it took a little bit for him to find his find who he was.
Definitely. And some of these people, I still don't think the studios ever fully knew what to do with them, which is why eventually a lot of them left, and
and especially MGM, I feel, was kind of bad at that. Like it took them forever to figure out what to do with Judy Garland. I mean, and they kind of never really figured it out.
And it's like, she's Judy freaking Garland. How hard could this be?
Yeah, well, yeah, but she was so young, she was this young girl with this gigantic voice. And people were like, what is this? What's happening here? And they were just bad at trying to figure her out.
I have to say, I always cringe. I frankly cannot watch some of the early Garland films where they refer to her as like the ugly duckling and they make comments and I'm just like, oh no, please don't do this. It's just, it's kind of
poor baby. Yeah, she was really not treated well.
She wasn't ugly at all. She was beautiful. It just wasn't in the way that they had set as their standard. Like,
the Lana Turner and Hedy Lamarr thing. Yeah.
I think, in fairness, 99.9% of us, if you put us next to Lana Turner and Hedy Lamarr, the rest of the universe is gonna fall short.
It's gonna look like a potato. Yeah, it's like,
how could you not?
But I wanted to say a few things about Marion in this movie because I think that her acting in this movie is kind of typical of what she did in the sound era, because she was never fully comfortable. She was never fully comfortable in the sound era for a couple of reasons. One is she was always aware of her speech. And then another reason was that she couldn't really be free in the same way that she was in the silent era. I mean, she could in the silent era, you really used your face, your eyes. She could tumble and, run around. And
had that same problem.
What was that?
Clara Bow, I think.
I totally agree. I mean, yeah, these people with these big, beautiful faces, could really use them in the silent era. And in the sound era, it was a big shift that a lot of people, I think, weren't so comfortable with. And Marion had these big eyes, and that was very much to her benefit in the silent era. And in the sound era, she had to rely much more on her voice, and be a little bit less free in her movements, because everything registers so much, and she didn't have to mime the way she did in the silent era, and I think that she was never very comfortable with it. So her acting feels a little stiff, because of those reasons, because she was so aware of herself, and because of the difficulties in adapting.
Well, it had to have been hard too, because you couldn't have the director like coaching you right off camera in sound like you could in silence. And then the way the films were made was so different, and the restrictiveness and the stress they went under of, will I make the transition? Will I not? Will I be laughed off the screen? I think it was really
Yeah.
such a rough time, and to see so many of your colleagues just fade into oblivion all of a sudden, and you're still trying to hang in there. I mean,
Yeah.
that had to have been a really kind of hard period to navigate.
Yeah, absolutely. And Marion, I think, what did really well. I mean, she hung in there and she dove in and she did it. She even did radio, which I think is, really courageous of her. And at the same time, she just was never comfortable in the medium, in the medium of sound film.
Silent stars. I think there were several silent stars that happened to, like in the sound early sound version of The Taming of the Shrew with Mary Pickford and Douglas Fairbanks. I'd always heard for ages what a big disaster it was, and I saw it many years ago at the UCLA Film Archive, and it wasn't. I would not call it a disaster, but the sequence where there's no dialogue and they're in the bedroom and they're both kind of going through this fight and then they start to make up, that is the strongest sequence in that entire film, and there's no dialogue in that sequence, and you can just tell they're like, okay, now we're in our element, and the rest of the movie not so much, and that awkwardness really shows. And I think that there's some stars that just were not made for the medium of sound like they were in silence.
Yeah. Yeah. I wish that Marion had something like that, in her movies, where she could just do her thing, her thing that she so loved doing in silent films. But there wasn't any. Trying to think if there was any time when she was ever acting without words in sound film. I can't really think of any.
I remember seeing many years ago a Peg of My Heart on the big screen at the Egyptian.
I love Peg of My Heart.
I do too, and she does a very convincing Irish brogue. At least
She had a really good ear. She had a very, very good ear for accents, for imitations. Like, have you seen Blondie of the Follies?
Yeah.
Where she does Greta Garbo at the end, and it's like you think you are watching and listening to Greta Garbo. Like, she is so good at doing Greta Garbo. So the Irish brogue, and I actually write a little bit about that in the book, in passing, just that the reason she said that the reason that she was able to do the Irish brogue in Peg of My Heart was because when she was a kid, she would hang out with all the Irish kids in the Bowery. They would go make mischief in the Bowery, and she picked up their accents, the sound of their accents, and she used that in Peg of My Heart.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah. How many more talkies? Forgive me for not knowing this off the top of my head, but how many talkies total did Marion make before she retired?
How many total talkies did she make? Well, I would have to count.
But she had a pretty substantial career. I mean, what, 1920, 1937. I mean, that's not so bad.
Yeah, no, she did. So she at Warner Brothers, she did Page Miss Glory, Hearts Divided, Cain and Mabel, and Ever Since Eve. So that's 4. And then before that, at MGM, let's see. Well, the Marianne and Hollywood Review of 1929. Those were the first two talkies that she did. Florodora Girl, just sort of going through her life here. Let's see, Florodora Girl, 5 and 10. I don't know. We could go on forever here, but yeah, I mean, it's yeah. I mean, yeah. She had a substantial sound career. I mean, it was. She certainly didn't make as many talkies as she did silence. Well, and that's partly because the silent era was so prolific, like they just churned stuff out. Yeah, but she definitely did, made it into the sound era. As it's not like she did one movie and retired.
Yeah, I mean, she definitely had a substantial career. Did she miss her career like after Ever Since Eve? That was it, 1937. Did she really long to do character roles or to kind of transition into any kind of other genres, or did she just
not at all? She was done. She was done. Yeah, she felt like she was done when sound came in. She thought that was the end of her career, and she would be happy with it being the end of her career. She kept going because Hearst wanted her to, and she wanted to make him happy. And so she knew that he wanted her to continue. So she sort of dove in and did it and enjoyed it. And she was proud of her work and, liked working, but her heart wasn't really in it after sound came in. And then in 37, when the Hearst empire was starting to fall, she felt like this was time. This was the moment where she could really retire and just be a private person, which she really wanted. Yeah,
that makes sense.
So she took care of him. That was her focus for the rest of his life, really, was to take care of him.
I'm always, in looking at lives of stars, I'm always fascinated, of course, by their careers, but I'm always interested too in the life after Hollywood, like what they do with that next chapter, and it's interesting because it seems some of them really adapt really well and have other interests and other things going on in their lives, and others, they just crumble, they just fall apart because it's like Hollywood was everything in their life and they just have no direction after that.
No, Marion was never she didn't ever rely on her stardom. She never wanted to be a star, really. She was content to just be a human being. And like I said, she was proud of what she did, and happy with her life as an actress, but it was never everything to her the way it was everything to other people. It looks like Catherine looked it up and it's 16 sound films. That sounds right. Yes.
Thank you. Excellent.
Yeah. And Ruth asks, does Marion Davies have extended family? Yeah, she does have some extended family. Yeah. She had 3 sisters, and two of those sisters had children. And then those children had children. So her sister Renee had Charlie Lederer and his older sister Peppy. Peppy died young, and Charlie married Anne Shirley, as a matter of fact. He married a couple of times, but yeah, married Anne Shirley, and they had a son, Daniel Lederer. And her sister Rose had a daughter, Patricia, and Patricia had 2 children. And then those 2 children had children, etc. So, yeah.
And you have relationships with many of her family members, because I know in the course of writing this book, you've gone over to France to visit many of them.
Yeah. Her great niece has become really a very close friend. And she's told me stuff that nobody else can tell me, and it's been an absolute blessing just to have her friendship, for one thing, because she's a wonderful woman, and also to hear all these amazing stories about the private Marion that she knew.
I would think as a biographer, having the trust of that family has got to be everything.
Yes, it means a lot to me.
How
I
you
don't
could
think
do
I could
one
have done it without that, without the trust of the family. I wouldn't have felt comfortable going ahead with it if the family hadn't wanted it to be done.
See, that makes total sense. Like whenever I see a book and it'll say unauthorized biography, I always go, I don't know about that. Because if they don't
Yeah.
have any family cooperation, I'm thinking, well, there's got to be a really good reason that, that family did not want to cooperate or something. But
Yeah. Yeah, and some people are just hesitant, which is understandable. But I think it says a lot about Marion, actually, that not one single person refused to talk to me.
wow.
Not one single person. Everyone wanted to talk about her and how much they loved her. And so it says a lot about how she related to people. Krista asks who was Marion's favorite leading man, and she never spoke badly about anybody, so I don't know if there was anybody that she really didn't like. Her favorite leading man, as a person, I think maybe Dick Powell. She loved Dick Powell as a friend, and she just really felt close to him. And she also enjoyed working with Robert Montgomery. She also enjoyed working with Leslie Howard. Yeah, so she never explicitly said who her favorite leading man was, but I know the people that she especially enjoyed working with.
He never gave like career retrospective type interviews or did some of those like career events, like say Betty Davis, Joan Crawford, women like that, who, would go on the stage and discuss their whole filmography, etc.
Yeah.
I love her with Billy Haynes.
What was that?
I love she and Billy Haynes.
Oh yeah. Oh well, Billy is so charming and so, wonderful. And she and Billy were great friends.
Tell me that story. Tell our viewers the story that you've told me about what Marion did to help Billy when.
Oh yeah. So Billy and his partner, his long-term partner, were on the beach one day. They were gay.
So we should point out to people who don't know that was really groundbreaking at that time. Billy was taking a big risk because.
Yeah, he was out on the beach with his partner, and they were attacked by a group of homophobic teenagers. And Marion, when she heard about this, was so upset and so distressed. She asked the Hearst papers to expose these people, find them and expose them, and make sure that to the fullest extent of the law. And so she was, just calling them and saying, you have to do something about this. This is terrible, terrible, terrible. And then Billy finally, Billy called her and was like, Marion, no, stop. Like, no, like we don't want this. This is going to call unwanted attention to us, and it's just going to be bad. And so, but she was so just out of her mind, upset about what happened to Billy and Jimmy. And she had to be told stop by Billy before she stopped.
And you mentioned that she had Billy and his partner Jimmy up at Hearst Castle until the situation kind of blew over.
Yeah, they did. They came up to Hearst Castle for a while and stayed. Yeah, when they didn't feel comfortable being at their house.
Again, what Jimmy did was so courageous because, I mean, the story, and if our viewers don't, you should learn about Jimmy Shields. He's pretty fascinating. I need to find a Jimmy Shields recipe. Holy crap. That needs to happen. But anyway, because Louis B. Mayer basically wanted him to play the game and date women or marry a woman or something. And correct me if I'm getting this wrong, that apparently Billy said to Louis B. Mayer, I'll give up Jimmy when you give up your wife. And then Louis B. Mayer,
I don't know that part of it. I've never read that.
I've heard that. I mean, again, I don't know if it's true, but from what I have read, Billy was pretty bold, about things. And he just walked away, and he was a huge star. I mean, in the 20s and the early 30s. And he
Yeah.
walked away from all of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, very, very secure in who he was, which is, I mean, that's so wonderful for that era, you know, that he was so, he knew who he was and he wasn't going to give it up.
And it's so brave. And Casey Lalonde, Joan Crawford's grandson, when I've talked to him, he told me Joan was so supportive, because when she first came to MGM, Billy kind of took her under his wing and helped her and everything. And then she never forgot that. And she helped him get work as an interior designer, and always had him decorate her homes and homes of her friends. And he became like one of the top interior decorators in the country.
Yeah. And you know that, I think I've told you this story, but that Hearst was the one that was responsible for helping Jimmy start his career as an interior decorator, because he noticed how keen of an eye Billy had for antiques. Whenever he was up at San Simeon, he he would ask about different things, and Hearst would explain to him, and so he gained this knowledge from him. And after his career was over, clearly his career was over at MGM, Billy was like, okay, well, what am I going to do now? And Hearst was the one who said, why don't you try your hand at interior decorating, because you have this great eye for antiques, and I've seen it in you, and I think you can do it. So he planted that seed, and Billy said, okay, and then he tried it, and it took off. Yeah, and Marion helped too, you know, but Joan Crawford helped, and also Marion was another one of his big clients.
And he, I think, had a 50-year marriage to Jimmy, and Joan used to say they were the happiest couple she ever knew.
Yeah, exactly.
But I love them together and show people. I have such a space in my heart for that particular movie. It's just such a charming, delightful. Oh, I love that movie so much.
Yeah, yeah. Well, my computer is about to die. I think I'm gonna have to plug it in a second. But Lisa asks, did Marion and Hearst have a love child? I'm gonna say no and leave it at that. I do not want to dwell too much on that. They didn't have any children together. Is there anything else that we want to talk about?
I think I'm good. When are we coming back for our Jean Harlow discussion?
So Jean is at 6:30, I think.
Okay, so we've got a little bit of a break now.
And yeah, we've got a little bit of a break. We've got a nice dinner break.
All right, and we'll come back at 6:30 to talk about Jean Harlow and to kick off our New Year's Eve night with Bombshell.
Yes, Bombshell. Oh, did we say we were going to do a cover reveal? Should I show my cover?
Yes. Oh my gosh, we so need to do that. Yes, I want to show everybody.
I'll just do it really quickly. I'll just show the cover really quickly before we go, before my computer like totally conks out on me. Am I able to share my screen? I don't know if I can.
You should be able to, but if not.
Oh, it says disabled participant screen sharing.
Make co-host. Okay, I made you the co-host, so you should be able to share screen now.
All righty. That is the cover.
That is a terrific cover. I love it.
Thank you. Yeah, I chose the photo, and then the UC Press art department did the font and all that. That's
a beautiful phrase, captain of her soul. I love that.
Yeah, and it comes from Marion's own description of herself. So I thought it was very appropriate. And
I cannot wait to read this book, and I am beyond excited to read it and to celebrate it. And I just can't wait. This is going to be thrilling.
Thank you. Yes, it's been a labor of love and a big job and a wonderful job. So yeah, very joyful.
And I think her story deserves to be told, and it's certainly in the best possible hands.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, so September 23rd, 2022, that's the latest date I have.
Excellent.
Yes. Yes.
All right.